Hey, we are back with another Friday episode of Go Find Yourself. And today we're talking about what? CBDCs? Everybody's
We're going to
favorite
talk about
topic,
central
especially
bank
mine.
digital currencies. Everybody's
You had to,
favorite
you had to think that
topic.
through for a second, didn't you? Central Bank. Oh, don't screw it
No,
up.
you're
Don't
just
screw it up.
laggy.
Oh, yeah, that must be it. All right, what are we covering?
Okay, we've done a full episode almost a year ago. Actually, it was for Easter last year that we did a central bank digital currencies episode where we dove into what is a central bank digital currency, what is the world doing with those central bank digital currencies, who has one, who doesn't have one, who's building one, who's not building one. And so I figured it was time that we come back and we kind of revisit what has come of those pilot programs, what's come of all that. So anyways, I've linked that in the description. If you missed that initial episode and you need some base knowledge about a central bank digital currency, take a look at it. I think it's 40 minutes long, but you can watch it on double speed, so it's not so bad. And then today we're going to talk about the digital yuan in China. And well, yeah, we're going to talk about it. It's got some reviews. It went live. People tried it. They sandboxed it. Some things were good. Most things were bad, as you might anticipate. We're going to talk about Japan's digital yen. We're going to talk about the digital euro. We're going to talk about the CBDC in Sweden. We're going to talk about the digital ruble. We're going to talk about the CBDCs in Brazil. We're going to talk about CBDCs
Brazil,
in Liberia. We're going to talk about CBDCs in America. We're going to end in America because in America, it's becoming very politicized with the election coming up. Whereas in other countries, it's kind of like we've already started a pilot program and here's the results within the year.
Yeah, this is funny because it's the GOP also that are rallying against the digital dollar, which may or may not be indicative of what they normally stand for as a party. So interesting. We'll definitely get into that. Okay, just quick. I might be a little funny on CBDCs today.
You're never funny.
This is like, this just boils my blood thinking about CBDCs, but super freaking exciting. So let's just get into it. Let's go.
Such a jam. Okay, before we actually get into what's going on in the different countries, JD, you're really funny on central bank digital currencies. Can you give us a little bit of background as to why that is?
Yeah. So this is going to sound super cliche, but to me, CBDCs are like the perfect example of a slippery slope dilemma. That it's kind of like many nationalized programs operated by the government, where it starts with like one little angle of why the government's involved, and then very slowly, kind of like straws on a camel's back, they keep adding new things in and new things in and new things in, and before you know it, you have a complete nanny state. And so, although that is probably an illogical end, like that us in America are going to end up in a complete nanny state, it's illogical, but it's not improbable. And if you look at historically empires and how kind of what the evolution of an empire has been, usually most empires end in some sort of autocracy and some sort of dictatorship type control. And you could make an argument that America may be heading in that direction. I sure hope not, for a whole host of reasons, obviously. But anyways, we're seeing these CBDCs in some other countries that probably aren't as liberty focused as America, if we can even say that anymore. And so we're already seeing evidence of that slope getting water poured on it, and the ice is starting to freeze for things to slide down. So that's my biggest criticism. Is it's one thing to regulate them. Totally get it. Totally get that there should be regulation of stablecoins. I'm a big believer of that, of course. It's not that I don't think the government should care or have some sort of influence. I just don't think the government should own it. So there's my opinion, because we all care.
Well, I felt like it was important for us to get our bias out there. I'm also not a huge fan of CBDCs for similar reasons. I do think it's the natural step that our governments are going to take, considering how, at least in the Western world, widespread digital adoption of banking, etc., is. Very few people, use cash. Last time I was in the States, I couldn't even pay for a coffee with cash. So it makes sense to me that we're going to see more regulation, but that doesn't mean I want it, right?
That was funny because you also can't use your debit card here either. So
yeah, Jake, you had to buy me a toothbrush. So
I was going to say traveling anywhere when Kiara's there in the US means you're just paying for her. That's how it works. Anyways, okay, let's jump into this. I think we both have a bias. I think the majority of the space carries a similar bias. Probably. So the first one,
I needed to uncover that bias before we started, because otherwise it's like, what is this episode even really about? Okay.
All right. So Callan Quinn, DL News Hong Kong correspondent, embarked on a journey to, how do you say this? Guangzhou? Guangzhou? To test the digital yuan. China's pioneering central bank digital currency, which has been integrated into 260 million wallets across 25 cities. Which is pretty impressive, actually. Despite China's ambition for wide adoption amongst its 1.4 billion citizens, Quinn's experience revealed a mixed reality. While certain transactions were successfully made using the yuan, such as the Canton Tower and the government-owned White Swan Hotel, numerous establishments, including local restaurants and convenience stores, did not accept it yet. Quinn's observations underline digital yuan's limited acceptance and the challenges it faces in competing with established payment giants like Alipay and WeChat Pay. Is this indicative of?
We actually talked about when China introduced their retail version of the digital yuan, because they introduced it in a particular area that wasn't particularly tourism focused.
It was a certain province, wasn't it?
Focused. Yeah. So they started in a city and then they expanded it to that state. And what was interesting about that is it was kind of like forced compliance within that city. And that's part of why this correspondent actually went there, was to see how well this had been taken up. So interestingly, she goes to the Westin Hotel and the concierge then says, yeah, you can use the digital yuan everywhere here. Well, not everywhere, but most places. And so from what I can tell, I kind of dove into her review a little bit further, and I did some rough Google Translate. So bear with me. Please correct me if you have a better grasp of the Chinese language than I do. But what I understood is that anywhere that's a big regulated organization was accepting it because they're required to accept it. And any mom and pop shop will say, yes, we take that here, but not right now.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of been a similar challenge with adoption of crypto payments anywhere. And it's the same challenge that existed when Square became Square and revolutionized point of sale payments. But the challenge has always been, okay, so you get a few users and clients in a certain area, but how do you scale internationally? I mean, Visa, MasterCard, Amex, Diners Club, etc., are accepted everywhere pretty much on planet Earth. So if you're going to compete, that's going to be the kind of the comparative basis. Is it as easy as using cash? And the answer is, well, no, until it becomes easier. Like it's more of a pain now because not everywhere has it. Go ahead.
Well, one of the things that she stated in her review is that WeChat Pay is huge in China. So how are they going to overcome WeChat Pay? But at the same time, China is pushing towards being cashless, mostly so that they can avoid things like people paying in other currencies like the USD. So I don't know. All in all, it's interesting to have somebody go in and have a little bit of an inside scoop on how it's really going, because the news that we get is like successful sandbox, right?
Yeah, I mean, this will be a good case study, I think, because I don't think there's anybody that expects China to not misuse the power associated with the CBDC. So if it can happen, it will in China. And so I guess we'll have to pay close attention to this one. But yeah, it's definitely an uphill challenge.
Stay in Europe. So this is interesting because, stay in Asia, because China said, hey, forced compliance, major companies are required to use this, mom and pop shops are required to use this, but we're not sure how we're going to hold you to that yet. Well, in Japan, they went a little bit of a different direction, and they're having an issue with awareness. So the Bank of Japan governor, Katsuo Ueda, highlighted the public's low recognition and understanding of the digital yen, Japan's iteration of the CBDC, with only 3.1% of Japanese consumers surveyed being aware of the CBDC concept and an additional 20% having heard of it but have no in-depth knowledge of it. The digital yen's familiarity starkly contrasts with higher recognition rates in the US. Way to also discuss the inherent differences and advantage of CBDCs over physical cash, including the transcendence of space, no physical storage requirements, potential for leveraging transaction data, governments. However, he also acknowledged the challenges such as privacy concerns and the risk of money laundering. As Japan progresses into the pilot phase of the digital yen this year in 2024, the speech underlines the crucial need for public education and addresses the regulatory landscape that sees private digital currency initiatives advancing.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's what we often skip over when we talk about this is that, of course, a CBDC is easier than money, than cash, than bricks of gold, than some sort of barter system. Like, I mean, of course, it's simpler, but there's other things that are as simple and maybe better that protect a lot of these, privacy concerns and autonomy a little bit better than a CBDC would. Now, to think that the government can't already see all on-chain transactions and deduce transaction history, we're lying to ourselves anyways. But this to me highlights kind of, again, it reiterates one of the same challenges that I mentioned with the last article, is distribution is tough. Like the challenge with these things, like look how long BTC has been around, right? Yeah. And now we're finally getting to the point of critical mass and global mass adoption, 15 years later. It takes time. It takes time for this awareness to grow and for it to start to kind of get its teeth stuck into things a little bit. I mean, this is the opposite challenge of China. China, you go and you say, hey, everybody's going to use this. We're going to ram it down your throat. You don't have a choice in certain areas. I'm obviously exaggerating the point. That's what China said. And then Japan said, yeah, we've got this digital yen. You can use it if you want. You can incorporate it if you want. But the consequence of that is they're so passive about it that no one knows about it.
Two very different sandbox applications. I wonder what others on our list might have learned from these two going live in 2023. Europe is looking at going live in 2025.
Let's just talk about Asia for the whole CBDC.
No.
Okay, fine. You notice how she has to keep me on track?
Yeah, tell us about Europe. Let's go.
I need like a full service, like babysitting service. Okay, European Central Bank is gearing up for the rollout of the digital euro by 2025, aiming to revolutionize digital payments across Europe. Piero Cipollone, yeah, a member of the ECB's executive board, announced this significant milestone at the Convengo Innovative Payments Conference. Digital euro is designed to complement cash by providing a secure, accessible digital payment option that respects user privacy and it's free for basic use. While it introduces cash-like features into the digital realm, including offline use, it faces scrutiny over privacy concerns. The initiative seeks to bridge the gap in digital payment solutions across the euro area, offering a standardized platform for all retail payment scenarios. However, the crypto community is skeptical. Who knew? Emphasizing the value of cash as anonymous and uncensorable, in contrast to the digital euro's potential for surveillance.
So one of the things that is interesting that they took from, I believe, the Sand Dollar, which was one of the only successful CBDCs that we saw launched previous to 2023, is that they are looking, right? Yeah, is that we are looking at the potential for offline usage of the CBDC. And so that's really interesting because that's one of the things that it could actually mitigate that crypto can't mitigate very well, is how can somebody participate in digital while not necessarily having consistent Wi-Fi, right?
Yeah. So the counter argument to that, the question that comes to my head is, what other point of service operates offline? Can you use your Visa offline anymore? No.
Right.
Can you use your debit card offline anymore? No.
Right. So I think this is actually a great segue into, okay, we're going to see Europe is going to put MiCA in place, right? Yep. And then it's going to be harder and harder to participate in crypto and participate in interplay and just participate in finance. And they've basically created, in terms of timeline, there will be about a 6-month gap, it looks like, before the CBDC rolls out. So people are going to suffer, be looking for a solution. And then, don't worry, we actually already planned a solution for you.
Your life is going to be so much easier because we have this beautiful thing that gives us all the control.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, again, these guys in Europe are at least saying the things that we need to hear to a certain extent, that they are caring about privacy. Whether they actually do care about privacy or not, or censorship, or the ability to be surveilled in real time and potentially controlled in real time. They talk about all that stuff, protecting against that stuff, but who knows if, again, the slippery slope. We talk about this always in politics, right? They establish some rule for one thing, and then all of a sudden that rule now covers 20 things. And you're just like, what? Anyways, not a big fan of CBDCs in general, as we can tell. So I'm going to pretty much FUD on every one of these articles.
All right. Okay, but the Euro CBDC has the opportunity to learn about offline payments and all of the difficulties of offline payments from Sweden. So Sweden's Riksbank concluded its digital krona pilot project with a final report that was released on March 20th. You can go and try to read it if you want. You have to translate it. It reviews the exploration of offline payment solutions for its CBDC, the e-krona. The pilot explored the use of shadow wallets so that you had privacy and security, actual payment cards for offline transactions, and how else we could be user-friendly to online payments. The pilot's findings underscore the ongoing efforts to address the technical and security hurdles of implementing CBDCs in real-world scenarios, with Sweden continuing its research into the e-krona in anticipation of potential legislation from overarching EU in 2025.
I think what's weird about these two, in particular in Europe, is like I think when you actually roll them out in practice, they're going to be fairly in line with what we're all hoping, at least at the beginning. But what you would think they would have done is a little bit more surveys of consumers and like market research, because to me, I feel like both of these are focused on a problem that isn't really a problem. Like the thought that our major concern is like rural businesses not having access to this is like, okay, I mean, they can worry about getting internet out there, and that's not our problem. But the vast majority of the world is connected. So,
well, I think this is a bigger problem. If you want to go super conspiracy, people talk about solar flares knocking down the internet for
that's actually
time. We look at energy crises where there's going to be everything offline for a period of time, but then it'll come back online and update. I think there are a lot of use cases in terms of crisis management planning that having offline payments for the government could be really useful for.
I surely stand corrected there. That's actually a really good point. There are some circumstances, whether we're tin hatting them or not, where, I mean, that's why people still like gold per se, because they're holding it physically. It's not numbers on a screen that someone else controls. Now, kind of one final thought on this. I know I'm shitting on CBDCs a lot, but we can look at what the governments are doing from a control perspective already, oversight perspective already. And the CBDCs are just a further extension of that, in my opinion. So anyways, if they would have done a little bit more research, I think they're going to figure out that a lot of these problems may or may not be as big as they think, but we'll have to see. I hadn't thought about that. So that's a good point, Kara.
So I kind of wanted to put all of BRICS together, Brazil, Russia, India, China, but I really wanted to start with China because they'd actually already launched their CBDC, and talking about that sandboxing is a good way to understand how relevant and current this really is. But Russia is also having a digital ruble that you could tell us about.
So on March 11th, 24, Vladimir Putin signed into law a significant bill permitting companies within Russia to use digital financial assets, including the digital ruble, for international payments. The legislation rapidly advanced through the Russian parliament to circumvent sanctions, which aims to facilitate trade with allied nations using digital tokens and CBDCs. The law grants the Central Bank of Russia extensive regulatory authority over the digital payment sector, obligating DFA issuers to disclose recipient information and mandating transaction logging. This move is seen as a strategic effort to mitigate the impact of Western sanctions on Russia's economy by diversifying international trade mechanisms.
So we talk a lot about how CBDCs, we've been talking about retail usage today on the show, but most CBDCs and the way that they were piloted was actually at this higher institutional
international
level,
trade,
international trade level. And so it's interesting to me that we're like, hey, having a CBDC will help us with anti-money laundering, but also maybe Russia will use theirs to prevent sanctions. So like, I don't really know where that stands.
Yeah, I mean, this is like fairly typical. Putin was like anti-crypto 10 minutes ago because he didn't want his citizens to have access to anything other than their fiat currency because he controlled it. And then once he realized that people were still going to use this stuff anyways, he's saying, okay, well, let's just bring it under our umbrella and still control it, but also provide a solution to the problem that the SWIFT sanctions have put on Russian citizens. And so this is, if anybody from the SEC or anybody is watching the pod, which I'm sure they are, all of our live viewers are probably SEC. But having said that, I mean, if you're watching the podcast, I mean, they yeah, I don't know. This drives me insane, this whole thing, but this is America's fault, in my opinion, because first of all, we've weaponized SWIFT, we've weaponized the US dollar as the global reserve currency, and while at the same time watching while all these other governments build, test, and deploy alternatives while doing nothing. So, I mean, we are the only ones to blame for our US dollar demise, in my opinion. And if I was Putin, I'd probably do the same thing. I mean, someone cuts off your access to global trade because of a disagreement in politics, and that's not acceptable. I get it. Like, I mean, I understand why the US tried to do it, of course, but I've disagreed with it the whole time. So it's our fault. It's our bed. We made it.
You know, on a positive note, it's fun to look at all the creative uses of a CBDC. You could pay for your hotel, or you could avoid global sanctions. Brazil also has some pretty interesting things that they're doing. It's the only CBDC I've found so far that is supposed to be a complement to cash instead of replacing cash. So Banco do Brazil, which is largely state-owned, in collaboration with a German tech security firm, is set to pilot the Brazilian I was like, I'm not pronouncing that today. They're going to call it Drex. Drex is going to feature offline payment functionalities. This idea is that it will broaden financial inclusion by facilitating transactions in remote and internet scarce regions of Brazil, addressing the critical need for a robust payment method in areas where digital infrastructure is lacking or during crisis situations that disrupt power and internet services. I didn't read this in advance, so good on me for finding that. The offline feature of Drex, positioned as a complement to cash, demonstrates a commitment to ensuring that the digital currency is accessible and functional for Brazilians anytime and anywhere, reinforcing its potential as a truly inclusive public digital currency. The pilot is supposed to launch at the end of 2024 and will underscore the importance of adaptability in digital finance to meet the diverse needs of the population. What do you think of Brazil complement to cash?
Yeah, it's interesting seeing how like the packaging that they put around CBDCs in different countries. So this one, oh no, we're not replacing fiat. No, don't worry. Your fiat's going to be there. It's going to be the same as always. We're going to introduce this new thing. As this new thing scales, are we going to phase out fiat? Who knows? We're going to realize, holy crap, we have a hell of a lot more insight into where and how people are spending money. And, you know, if we ever had to, I suppose we could automatically garnish taxes right from these wallets, and like we can do all this other crazy stuff. Again, I hate to be a stuck record on this, but to me, this is just another example of the slippery slope. Russia's got a reason, and they package it in a reason that the population is like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Oh, we got to have this new digital Drex so that if the power ever goes out nationally, you've got a solution to fiat. What? If the power goes out, fiat is it actually easier currently? So, anyways, it's and Russians, but you can get people on board with that. People are like, oh yeah.
There's actually an interesting thing here that Regini, who's the vice president of digital business at Banco do Brazil, said. This is a quote: "Brazilians can benefit from the solution in their daily lives, carrying out secure transactions in local shops. For example, without the need for a bank account or the internet. You can already do that with cash."
Yeah. So again, to me, this is marketing, right? Putin wrapped it in international sanctions. All you oligarchs, if you want to move your money, you better support this. Okay. And here in Brazil, they're saying, everybody else is doing this. We want to be, technology forward, but don't worry, it's not going to replace fiat until it does. So again, I mean, I hope I'm wrong, honestly, on this. I hope the slippery slope isn't very steep or slippery. I just, if we look around at the countries that are doing this and look how the progress has happened so far of regulation, of adoption of cryptocurrency and how they're engaging it, I feel like it's not all with pure intentions. So,
okay, tell us about.
I mean, good for Brazil, but go ahead.
You've got to tell us about Liberia, because they are also coming at this from a slightly different marketing angle.
Yeah. So Liberia is where they send people that are in big trouble, isn't it? From Russia? They just send you to Liberia. Is that true?
I don't know. I think it has the largest confinement center, but it's technically Liberia is on the country of what is on the coast of West Africa. I think you're thinking of Siberia.
No, I was thinking of Liberia. Anyways, it doesn't matter. Okay, Glua, a real-world assets platform, in its discussions to play a pivotal role in developing Liberia's central bank digital currency, aiming to enhance the nation's digital financial infrastructure. Period. In a recent meeting with Liberian President Joseph Boakai, Glua CEO Teo explored the CBDC's compatibility with Liberia's mobile money systems and proposed a novel solution for the country's slow internet connectivity, launching a satellite-based internet service. This initiative seeks not only to facilitate the CBDC's integration, but also to broaden digital financial services accessibility, especially in rural areas. The move comes on the heels of Glua's involvement in digital currency projects in Nigeria, Ghana, marking a significant step towards financial inclusivity and digital transformation in Liberia.
Okay, so
that was really hard.
I don't know a lot about Liberia. I don't want to claim to know a lot about Liberia. I'm not gonna say that, but I know that in West Africa, they had many issues with providing secure and stable internet to many different countries. And that's part of like why WhatsApp took off and that kind of thing. So it's interesting to me that they're like, no, there's no way that we can provide internet for you unless you want to use our trackable currency. We'll just launch a satellite. What's the problem?
What a coincidence. There's satellites all over. I mean, I think the easiest way to do this would be to use Starlink. And I'm not sure what the power requirements are for Starlink, but I suspect there's probably some pretty easy ways to build backup systems into internet connectivity now that we have Senor Musk and this global mesh of satellites over the Earth. So this is definitely possible. I mean, they're all kind of just trying to find their own ways to package these things. We've been saying this for going on 2 years now, you and I.
Yeah.
It's only a matter of time. Whether we like it or not, all the governments are going to see opportunity, potential, control, oversight, and they're going to take advantage of it. Like, I mean, to think that we're not going to have CBDCs globally, I think is a pipe dream. I hope we don't, but we will.
So to end on the funniest note that we could ever end on, we're going to talk about America.
Okay. Go.
So, okay. Before we start, JD, you're in America. How's the election campaigning going?
It never ends in America. We started the presidential campaign 2 years into the 4-year term. So right. It's like, it's all you ever hear about is all this nonsense. The problem is that there's a lot of politicking in America because there is an election every 2 years, no matter what. Every 2 years, midterms, there's an election in America. So there's politicking all the time. So anytime you get close to an election cycle, there's always, well, what does this party want to, promise to their constituents so that they get reelected, et cetera, et cetera. So this to me is an example of how frustrating American politics are. Do you want to introduce the article first and then we'll go?
Yeah, desperately. Okay. So despite public denials and ongoing controversy surrounding the creation of a US CBDC, recent disclosures by Representative Tom Emmer suggest that a Federal Reserve used the development of digital dollar as a responsibility. Emmer, sharing insights from a presentation given to Congress, highlighted that the Fed categorizes CBDC under its key duties of the Fed payment systems alongside TradFi operations. This revelation comes amid a heated political debate with figures like Donald Trump and various state and federal lawmakers opposing a US CBDC, citing concerns over privacy, government surveillance, and so on and so forth. Federal Chair Jerome Powell insists on proceeding only with congressional approval, emphasizing the digital dollar's conceptual stage and the Fed's commitment to privacy. I just want to note before you get too far in here that we also have the other side's story on it. So whenever you're ready for that, you move on over.
We can hear from the other side. Yeah. So I mean, this is pretty pretty normal for GOP, being the conservative party-esque in America. Privacy, liberty is like kind of one of their core principles. Obviously, it's really easy to latch onto because the base of the Republican Party also rah privacy, autonomy, etc. So it's a bit of a battle cry for their base, similar to what I was saying about all these governments elsewhere. They're trying to rally their base with something that they think will matter. Privacy in this particular case is kind of what they're latching onto. I mean, the other problem that this exemplifies, I think, in the way that the US system is run, is that Jerome Powell had to come out and say that he's going to wait for Congress because he doesn't have to wait for Congress. And that's insane. It's insane that such a small amount of people without congressional approval can actually implement such drastic changes that impact everybody. So, I mean, I'm happy that they're rallying against the CBDC. I mean, DeSantis in Florida, and there's a few other governors that have been pretty vocal. I think Abbott in Texas.
Okay, no, tell us about this. They actually have an anti-surveillance state act about the CBDC.
Right. So despite public denials and ongoing controversy surrounding the creation. What?
Next
one. You put it up there. I'm reading.
In a decisive move to curb the Federal's Reserve.
I'm reading the one on the screen. What are you talking about?
Well, read the brief.
There isn't. I don't have it. Go ahead. You read it.
In a decisive move to curb the Federal Reserve's potential to launch a central bank digital currency, GOP senators led by Senator Ted Cruz of Texas are introducing the CBDC Anti-Surveillance State Act. This legislation aims to prevent the Federal Reserve from issuing a CBDC to Americans without explicit congressional authorization. Amidst concerns over privacy and financial surveillance, the bill emerges as part of a broader Republican strategy to position the debate over a digital dollar at the heart of the 2024 presidential campaign. The initiative reflects growing apprehension among conservative lawmakers that a CBDC could enable government overreach into citizens' financial activities. With the Biden administration endorsing Fed's CBDC research for improved payment systems, the proposed legislation underscores a significant rift over digital currency and its implications for Americans' privacy and autonomy.
Yeah. I'm not sure that we're going to get to the point where the citizens have some sort of say in this in America. A lot of this stuff is done via the bureaucracy. But I suspect if you actually explained what a CBDC was and then made it a meaningful topic of conversation, I think you would find that there is a lot of people, Democrat, Republican, liberal, conservative, there's a lot of people that don't feel awesome about CBDCs and have many, many, many concerns. And in their current state, in a democratic society, I suspect most people would not want them. So, I mean, I like this coming from Cruz. It was led by Cruz. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm just hoping it's not lip service. Like these laws and stuff have to have some teeth for it to actually matter. Like, what happens if there is financial overreach? How do we define financial overreach? How do we know if that's happened? What are the parameters of what constitutes overreach? My opinion on that and someone else's opinion on that might be vastly different. So, I mean, it's good to see that there's some groups trying to, influence, I suppose, how this all happens. And we've got a few lawmakers in the US that have been pretty solid in trying to pursue meaningful crypto regulation. But
the only thing I don't like is the extreme politicking of it. Like you said, if they just came out and they were very transparent about what a CBDC looked like and how that worked, we could make educated decisions. But instead, Cruz says things like the Biden administration salivates at the prospect of emulating China's use of CBDCs. It's like, okay, well, you haven't outlined what China's use of CBDCs is. You're just fear-mongering in terms of China, and you're politicizing in terms of hating Biden, which everyone hates Biden. It's not really a big deal. So I'm not even against the movement, but I hate seeing all the politics influencing and misinforming that movement.
I mean, that's everything in Western society at the moment. Generally speaking, is like you can't even watch the news anymore without like it's so partisan in the US. Like anybody that's on the news that's a Democrat refers to all Republicans as far right extremist MAGA Republicans. And then vice versa. All Republicans refer to Democrats as extreme far left socialist Nazis. Like, and it's just like, what?
Totally.
Like, no, that's not actually how everybody thinks and feels. That's not like, it doesn't need to be this divisive. But that's politics, especially in America. It's obnoxious, to be honest. It's obnoxious. Anyways, CBDCs, I don't like them. Lots of governments are trying them. I don't think there's any approach that I'm really like excited about, to be honest. Like I feel like they've all, it's a lot of like superlatives and smoke and mirrors and we're going to do this better than everybody else thinks, but there's no substance to any of that. Once I see some substance, then I'll be excited. Go ahead.
Sorry. I think the main theme shift, though, is that last year at this time, we were talking a lot about institutional cross-border payments, that kind of thing. And now the themes have really switched to retail usage. And there's this strange narrative about rural/offline payments. And so that is a really big narrative change to just be aware of if you are concerned about the slippery slope or if you want to stay updated on all of the pilot programs. Last year was a lot of institutional. This year is a lot of retail.
We could probably spend a whole other episode on how you could, if the power went out, how you could still find ways to make transactions via Bitcoin or other existing digital currencies. Yes, the internet kind of has to exist, but there's other ways with cryptography and different things, I'm sure, to figure things out.
Actually, that's an interesting topic.
We're a pretty smart society to think that the only way to prevent that shit is for the government to control it. I don't think so.
They haven't so far.
They haven't so far. Anyways, we're going to keep talking about CBDCs because it is something that is critically important to global finance, to geopolitics, to the crypto space at large, to all of us. So we're going to keep talking about it, whether I like it or not. Maybe someday they're going to bring us on Capitol Hill so we can talk about our opinion on CBDCs. I would do that. So if anybody's watching from the government and you want me to come to Capitol Hill and give my opinion on CBDCs, I will happily do it. Anyways, that's it. That's the week. It's the week of news.
It's a whole week of news. Next week,
and
we're back on Monday. We do the weekend news roundup. You can join us so that you can go touch grass over the weekend, and we don't.
I'm going to be touching clouds. I'm flying home today, actually. So, yeah. Anyways, we'll be back next week with the pod, as always, Monday to Friday, 12:30 p.m. Eastern. Love seeing you guys watching live. Please feel free to comment. We and the production team watch the comments, so usually we'll respond. And if you have questions, happy to answer. Like, share, subscribe. Help us get the word out. We're just trying to help the crypto space get rid of a little bit of FOMO and hopefully dispel some of the FUD, if I don't perpetuate it myself, so that we can just have a balanced, transparent approach to the crypto space and we can see through the nonsense. With that, I say to you, Kiara, go fud yourself. Later, guys.